Fatty liver is an issue with excess, period. I have no problem coming out and saying that because we have people in two different camps that love to fight each other about this. And candidly, personally, I find it frustrating. You have one camp that says carbohydrates are purely the problem, and that's what triggers a fatty liver. You have another camp that says it's fat, it's excess fat consumption. That's what causes a fatty liver. You know what? Both arguments are correct. And there is a place in which they intersect. And that is what most of us are dealing with. And that is an overabundance of food and an overconsumption of hyperpalatable stuff that absorbs very fast, faster than our body can handle. And the root of metabolism is really in a lot of ways in our liver. And if we are bombarding our liver with too much in the way of nutrients in general, when I say nutrients, I mean, in this case, fat and carbs, we cause a problem. Let's investigate which one is the more likely culprit in today's society. After today's video, check out Thrive Market. They are an online membership-based grocery store, but the best part is there's a 30% off discount link off your entire grocery order if you use the special link that is down below this video in the description. They're a sponsor on this channel. They have been for a half a decade, and that's why the savings are extended to you. So 30% off your entire grocery order plus a free $50 gift when you do use that link. So the cool thing is you go to Thrive Market, you sort by whatever diet type. Be like, I want to do keto. Type in keto. It's going to bring you all the foods that are keto, all the foods that are vegan, paleo, whatever you want to do, and then it gets delivered right to your doorstep in a couple of days. Super easy. So that link down below in the description. So there was a study that was published in the journal Hepatology that took a look at 5,908 people. And it took a look at these people that were consuming either diet sodas or regular sodas over a period of time. And then they measured something that is called alanine transaminase. Now this is an enzyme that is typically elevated, almost always elevated, in people that have a fatty liver. They found the people that consumed the regular sodas, even if they roughly ate the same amount of calories as people that consume the diet sodas, there was a higher level of alanine transaminase, meaning a higher degree of fatty liver. So this would let people think that, okay, well, sugar is the problem. It's purely the issue, and we need to reduce our sugar intake. Okay, well, that does make sense in a lot of ways. So let's understand how this works really quick. When we consume fructose, or when we consume sugar in general, sugar has glucose and fructose. The glucose portion of sugar goes around and it gets sucked up by our muscle cells, used as energy in the muscle cells, in the brain, whatever. The other half, the fructose, is awesome stuff, but the problem with fructose is that it has to be metabolized in the liver. So when you have an abundance of fuel and there is too much fructose and too much glucose, the liver says, okay, well, I can only store so much of this fructose. It can't go anywhere else. It can't go to muscle glycogen, so I can only store it here. If I start getting 40, 50, 60, 70 grams of fructose, well, I have to store it as fat, and it stores it in the liver, fatty liver. So yes, that would lead us to believe that this is the sole problem, but we cannot be myopic when we look at this. We also know that fats themselves, especially saturated fats, store very easily too. Now, this is difficult for the low carb community to hear. It was difficult for me to hear at first too, but not all fats are created equal, okay? Some fats break down pretty fast, and some fats, like saturated fats, specifically palmitic acid, that takes a long time to break down, elevating blood lipid levels for a long period of time. This can do a couple of things. These saturated fats themselves can directly go to the liver and actually store as fats. But saturated fats also impact our insulin resistance, right? So if we have high levels of saturated fat and high levels of lipids circulating through the bloodstream that are not getting oxidized fast enough because we've eaten, hey, magic words here, too much of them, guess what happens? Well, then the liver takes the brunt of the load. Now here's another study that looks at saturated fat in a fatty liver. This study was published in the journal Diabetes Care. It took a look at a 4-week analysis, 4-week diet of a higher saturated fat diet versus a high sugar diet. They found the high saturated fat diet ended up leading to a 39% increase in triglycerides. That's pretty interesting because normally we would expect more sugar to trigger triglycerides, which it absolutely does. But it found that saturated fat also increased triglycerides. They also found that saturated fat ended up leading to a high postprandial glucose. Whoa, 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 what's happening here? I thought fats slowed down the digestion of carbs. At a digestive level, they do. Okay, but if you have, once again, operative words here, too much saturated fat, the saturated fat can actually impede an insulin receptor from receiving a signal from insulin, therefore driving up glucose higher. Now, there are some studies that document that you can have a 50% increase in insulin resistance almost immediately with a high saturated fat meal along with carbohydrates. And what do we typically eat in today's society? We don't typically. Okay, I mean, I'm sure there's people out there, but when you look at a lot of obese people, they're not eating just Skittles and jelly beans and like pure sugar, Skittles, jelly beans, and sodas, right? No, they're eating these high sugar things along with high fat foods, right? So maybe they're having some jelly beans and a soda, but they're also eating fried chicken and donuts, right? So you're getting fats and sugars combined, where you're having an overage of sucrose, fructose, and glucose, and you're also having a huge amount of saturated fat. So guess what's happening? Okay, so now you have saturated fat that is directly impeding, and I hate to say it, and I know you don't want to hear it, but saturated fat does impact insulin resistance still if you have too much of it. So saturated fat impacting the insulin receptor. So now you have more circulating glucose. That glucose then has to go to the liver. It has to go through de novo lipogenesis and get converted into fat. Well, oh shoot, already at that same time, unfortunately, the liver's also dealing with a copious amount of fructose that's come in from the 200 grams of high fructose corn syrup that was just consumed. You see where I'm going with this? Because the saturated fat has made the liver more sensitive to the impacts of fructose and glucose, then, not necessarily only then, but then you really see an exacerbated response. And it makes it look like glucose and fructose and sugar is the pure problem. It is a huge part of the problem, do not get me wrong. But the saturated fat arm is playing a huge role too. So is it one or the other? No, it is both. But I can tell you that by reducing one or the other, you can cause a positive impact. So don't get upset over the fact that it could be saturated fat that's the problem. It could be sugar that's the problem. Guess what? You don't have to reduce both. You should maybe reduce both, but if you reduce just one of them, you'd probably make a positive impact. So here's my playbook for you. Okay, with saturated fat, less than 20% of your total calories from fat should be saturated fat. If you eat 100 grams of fat per day, no more than 20 grams of it should be saturated. Now, if you increase your amounts of monounsaturated fats, things like pork is rich in monounsaturated fat, macadamia nuts, monounsaturated fat, olive oil, avocado oil, this can actually increase insulin sensitivity. The more you replace the saturated fats with the mono and the polyunsaturated, the stronger your insulin response will be. Now, with carbohydrates, the best way that we can mitigate this, you don't need to just cut out all the sugar out of your life, although that would probably be great. If you increase fiber, then you offset that. So magically, by changing the saturated fat and the types of fats you consume and adding some fiber into the diet, things start to come together. And then you might start seeing a positive impact on that alanine transaminase level and the fatty liver. I'll see you tomorrow.